Welcome to another episode of In the Nude. Today I want to talk about capital G good and capital B bad. It's a lot. First I want to talk about why I want to talk about it and then what it is before we get into the nitty-gritty. Why I want to talk about it is because I feel like dismantling or understanding the capital G good and the capital B bad helps us with our healing process, but even more so specifically, I feel like it helps us with self-compassion, with coming to the table of being able to give ourselves that grace. And for us to be able to, after we've given ourselves that grace, give other people that grace. Because as much as I didn't want to hear it at the beginning of my healing journey, you cannot offer to other people what you cannot offer to yourself. We can try, but it's always a broken version of what it is we want to offer. So what is capital G good and what is capital B bad? What I mean by that when I say that is it's the morality of actions, right? It's taking something and deciding that this is a good behavior and this is a bad behavior, right? And in the sense of like good person, bad person, like if you turn this way, you are good. If you turn this way, you are bad. Okay. So where does this come from? What is this mentality? Okay, when you were a kid, you want love, you want affection, you want acceptance, you want connection, right? Depending on your childhood, you more than likely got less of it when you were a bad child, and you got more of it when you were a good child. Okay, well, what does a good child look like? Oh, that's complicated, right? Well, what was your family experience? Probably wasn't the same as my family experience. Maybe in your family, being a good child meant straight A's. Maybe in your family, being a good child meant being quiet and calm and not being seen. Maybe being a good child in your life was being creative and loud and gaining people's attention or getting on stage. Maybe being a good child, you see what I mean? But whatever the action was that got you to be a good child, listening to your parents, obeying your parents, memorizing scripture, whatever it is, that action that got you to be a capital G good child got you what you needed, what you wanted: love, affection, attention, acceptance. And then as a childhood brain, you don't question the why or if it's okay, or not to a degree that you don't embody it. You may question, oh, I don't know if that's okay, but you still swallowed it into yourself. You assume that there's something wrong with you. And in so, we start having this dynamic, both taught verbally, but in a lot of cases just simply implied, what is capital G good and what is capital B bad on what we should do in life and how we should function in life. And in that diagram, it makes everything seem so clear and so crisp, and it's so controlled, so simple. It's why people like it. It's why people come to the table of judgment. It isn't that they're naturally thinking, I want to sit there and like wag my finger. Maybe for some people, but for most, it's a natural byproduct of this Venn diagram. Here's a silly example that can connect over to how this can work. I was with some friends, we were going to pack some lunches, and one person wrote the list, right? Meat, cheese, bread. Another person went to the store to get said meat, cheese, bread. But they came back and they had gotten the wrong cheese. Wrong cheese for who? Well, the person who wrote the list was thinking Kraft American Singles, and the person who got the things at the grocery store thought a block of cheddar cheese. Then this became this silly argument of what actually cheese is and what was the right choice and what was the wrong choice. And that's an example of how silly this morality of capital G good and capital B bad are. Getting into the thick of it, we all know, even if we don't like pull it into ourselves, an action on its own can often be put in many different categories. It's the heart behind it. Silly example again is, I have $10 and I see a homeless person, I give that person $10. Is that capital G good? Is it capital B bad? Just on that basis, depending on your background, your political beliefs, etc., you might have a different mentality on where that falls. Then what if I tell you I did that and then ask myself why? And I did it because it made me feel like a good person to give that. So now I'm giving that $10 away, but it's not about that person, what they need, it's about me. Well, is that capital G good or is that capital B bad? Well, that again depends on your perspective and how you're hearing it. It also depends on my perspective and observation. Maybe I'm in a time frame in my life where I'm trying to make choices that make me enjoy life more. So, it gets really complicated, it gets really gray, it gets really murky. The labeling of capital G good or capital B bad doesn't actually matter. Oh, I know. It's a little uncomfortable right there, right? But it doesn't, because what all that does is pit yourself against yourself. At any point, at any time in a spectrum of a day, we're going to have lots of feelings, lots of experiences. And any type of person who comes to the table and says, only light is good, only happiness is good, only everything on this side of a flow chart, right? All the way shoved over here, right? That person isn't good, because there is not light without darkness. There is not joy without sadness. There is an entire spectrum of light and color and feelings on purpose. Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't make it bad. Just because something is enjoyable doesn't make it good. It's a lot of uncomfortable. But why am I bringing it up, okay? There's a lot of philosophical, a lot of extremes you can take this to, but the meat of why I bring up dismantling the idea of good, capital G, and bad, capital B, is because when we come to the table and we have this perspective of stamping things like they have this moral compass, it comes with judgment. It comes with this wagging a finger, it comes with this condescension, and it comes without compassion. One of the most integrated needs of yourself for healing, of moving, of changing, is allowing yourself to be where you are and giving yourself compassion. We've tried the judgment, we've tried the condescension, we've tried the hating on ourselves. It's not been working for us. Okay, we're doing the compassion. So instead of trying to label everything as capital G good, capital B bad, why don't we just observe what is? Like little kids, okay? Like little kids. I have multiples of them. Each one of them has this, like, there's an age range where they just observe and ask questions, and they don't think about the impact of what somebody else might perceive the question to be. Like, people hear a question and they naturally think there's a negative ramification, okay? 2 examples. One, why does he have gray hair? The kid isn't judging that person for having gray hair. The kid isn't saying that person shouldn't have gray hair. They observe they have gray hair, and mommy, you don't have gray hair. Why? That person has a big belly. Why? It isn't saying having a big belly is bad. It isn't saying that they shouldn't have a big belly. It's saying they have a big belly. You don't have a big belly like they do. Why is there a difference? It's an observation of what is and a curiosity without judgment. There comes a time and a place where a kid realizes, because of the reaction that happens when they ask questions or the chastisement that they get for having asked that question, that they no longer are allowed. So we're needing to relearn these habits that we used to have as innate children for ourselves. When I give that $10 to the homeless person, asking myself, you feel, fill in the blank, why? You did that, but why did you do it? And it's asking that question not as a place of judgment, like I should be feeling this way, or I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I should have done that, or I shouldn't have done that, but just asking to observe. And when we come to the table with curiosity, we are making a choice, a cognate choice. Most of our life is unconscious. It's default. Think about how you could drive on a highway for exits and completely just like default. You're like, oh man, I just 10 exits and I didn't even, or you get off on an exit that's the exit you normally get off on, and you weren't intending to go to your office or whatever it is, that place, and you're like, oh junk, I've got to get back on. Or you get off and it is where you're going, and you're like, oh man, I was just on autopilot. So much of our life is autopilot. But if you don't want to keep having the life that you have and you're wanting it to adjust and change, part of the work is turning on and pulling off of autopilot. How do we do that? It's by asking questions. It's by observing. It's about gathering wonder about yourself. Why do I feel that way? Now that makes sense, considering this, and this. You want to feel like a good person. Well, when you were a good child, fill in the blank, what happened? Okay, that makes sense. When we pull online, when we ask those questions, when we challenge what is good and what is bad, when we allow ourselves to just see where we are and have compassion for, man, that makes perfect sense that you struggle with perfectionism. You had this like continuous, like no matter where you got, oh, well, you didn't get 100%. Well, now you get 100%. Where's the 110? No wonder. Well, maybe if I was just more perfect, I'd be loved. No wonder. Or maybe you tend to have a messy house and it's because you tried so hard and then you decided, you know what, it's never going to be good enough. So instead of trying to attain that, you're like, fork it, I'm done. Something that's going to get me in trouble on the internet is a clean house is not moral. It's not you're not a morally good person to have a clean house. Yay, I'm glad you like it if you have it that way. You're not a morally bad person if you don't. I know it's going to be a whole thing for people because, and I don't mean that condescending, it was a whole thing for me. I say it because I've talked about this before and man, oh man, does the internet like explode. Especially, well, we're not going to get to those stereotypes, but I was a person who literally thought having a clean house was morally good. I ended up stressing out and snapping on my children because I like a clean and tidy house. Now, I like a clean and tidy house. My brain functions better as an ADHD person having everything away, and that hasn't changed. But as a single mom of 4 kids who owns 2 businesses, having a pristine staged house is not on the docket. Having it clean, sanitized, sure. Having my kids participate in that process, sure. But is having that clean, tidy house for me the thing that matters more? Or is my kids having fun and me playing? Me being able to experience my kids' childhood and my own reparenting and enjoying the process? If you struggle with having a house that's tidy or clean, you're not a morally bad person. Honestly, it's a great time to ask yourself why. More often than not, it goes back to some childhood stuff. Even if you weren't even in a CPTSD kind of situation where you felt like you had a mostly good childhood, right? Most of what we do now is because of how we've connected and habits and personalities, and even our personalities and habits often coincide with their experiences. They both are nature and they're nurture. They're a combination of the two, and most of the time they can't be separated. I have ADHD. I have had an extensive conversation with multiple therapists on whether it is I have ADHD, and it is, or if I have ADHD because of my CPTSD. The two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive, and does it matter which one it came first? Does it matter if mine is a reaction to the stress that this was? No, because how I cope with it remains the same. It's an interesting question, a quagmire. But that's another topic for another day. All of this is to say, if you take the time to dismantle the idea and question and come curiously to the table of what is capital G good, and realize maybe it's not. Maybe it's not the right cheese. Maybe cheddar cheese is the cheese I was raised with, but maybe Swiss cheese was theirs and provolone cheese was theirs. It's okay. That ability to reframe pulls your brain online, allows you to start observing and adjusting and shifting. But the ways those shifts happen are not through judgment, but are through compassion, through love. I know it's hard because a lot of us haven't really felt that. But you're worth feeling that for yourself. You're worth doing that work for yourself. Even if you're the first person who's ever done it, you're worth that love.